Who's that? Daniel's voice cut through the tense silence. Didn't even look up. Just a work thing, I blurted, voice a little too high, too fast. Idiot. Work this late? His brow furrowed, a flicker of suspicion crossing his eyes for a brief, terrifying moment. Yeah. Big deadline, I lied, shoving a forkful of now cold pasta into my mouth. The taste was like ash. Screen wouldn't stay dark. Name blazed across it. Mark. My stomach lurched. Ignored it. Forced myself to chew, swallow. Everything all right? Concern edged his voice. Fine, I muttered, forcing a smile that felt strained, alien. Another buzz. Ignored it again. This wasn't helping. Had to get rid of the damn phone. Think I'll go check on that email. I lied again, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Stood up. Phone clutched like a secret weapon in my sweaty hand. Need help with the dishes? No, I got it. Already halfway to the bedroom, phone tucked against my chest. Needed to see the message, needed to know what it said, needed to, what? Burst into the bedroom, slammed the door shut behind me with more force than necessary. Fumbled with the phone, the screen blindingly bright in the dim room. Change of plans, it read. Meet me at the park in 10. 10 minutes? Panic choked me. 10 minutes wasn't enough time to come up with a believable excuse, not after the work lie. 10 minutes to choose between my life and this. Stared at the message, the words blurring at the edges. This thrill, this forbidden thing, was starting to feel less like excitement and more like a tightrope walk over a bottomless pit. Groaning, I rolled over, expecting the warmth of Daniel beside me. Empty. Panic jolted me awake. Clock screamed 3:45 a.m. Daniel? I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. No answer. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at me. He never left the bed. Not ever. Threw on a robe, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Clicked on the hallway light, the sudden brightness momentarily blinding me. Padded downstairs, each creak of the floorboards echoing in the pre-dawn silence. Kitchen, empty. Living room, empty. Dread coiled in my gut, tightening with every silent room. Found him in his home office, hunched over his computer, a worried frown etched on his face. Daniel? My voice wavered. He spun around, startled. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me weak. Sarah, what are you doing up? He blinked, the worry lines on his face deepening. Couldn't sleep, I lied, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. Needed some water. He gave me a long, searching look, his gaze lingering on my face a beat too long. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Everything all right? His voice was low, hesitant. My throat tightened. How could I answer that? How could I explain the fear, the guilt bubbling like a pot about to boil over? Yeah, just a bad dream, I mumbled, forcing a smile that felt brittle. He didn't look convinced, but he didn't press it either. Just nodded curtly and turned back to his computer screen. Guilt gnawed at me. The lie hung heavy in the air, a silent accusation. He deserved better. But the thought of losing this, of losing him, terrified me more than anything. Stood there, watching him work, the silence amplifying the storm raging inside me. This couldn't go on. The lies, the guilt, the fear. They were slowly suffocating me. But the thought of facing the consequences, of losing everything, was even more terrifying. He glanced back at me, his gaze catching mine. I looked away, unable to hold it. Going back to bed, I mumbled, my voice barely a whisper. He gave a tired nod. All right. Climbed back into bed, the sheets cold and empty beside me. Sleep felt a million miles away. All I could see was his worried face, a stark reminder of the life I was playing with fire to destroy. Bumped into Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store, my heart leaping into my throat like a startled frog. We exchanged pleasantries, the usual small-town niceties. But her gaze lingered a beat too long, her smile a touch too knowing. Panic clawed at me. Did she see me? See me where? With him? The thought sparked a wave of nausea, the weight of my secret threatening to topple me over. Lovely to see you, Sarah, Mrs. Henderson said finally, pushing her cart towards the dairy aisle. You too, I mumbled, forcing a smile that felt strained even to me. Hurried through the rest of the shopping, my mind racing. Was it just my guilty conscience making mountains out of molehills? Or had she genuinely seen something? Back home, the silence of the empty house pressed in on me. Daniel was working late again, a trend that had become worryingly frequent. Relief warred with a gnawing fear. Was he truly swamped at work, or was this his way of distancing himself? The phone buzzed on the counter. Mark. My breath hitched. Ignored it. Shoving groceries into the fridge with a force that rattled the shelves. The damn phone wouldn't stay silent. Each buzz felt like an accusation. Finally, grabbed it, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Everything okay? The text message filled the screen. A simple question, but it felt loaded, laced with a hidden meaning only I could understand. Stared at the message, the familiar thrill replaced by a cold dread. This wasn't exciting anymore. It was a tangled mess threatening to unravel my entire life. Thumb hovered over the reply button. What to say? How to explain the growing distance between me and Daniel, the guilt gnawing at me from the inside out. A car pulled into the driveway. Daniel. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me weak. Shoved the phone back on the counter, the screen accusingly bright. Hey, I said brightly as he walked in, the forced cheerfulness grating even to my own ears. He looked at me, his face etched with fatigue. But there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of suspicion I hadn't seen before. The lie died in my throat, replaced by a cold certainty. The game was up. Nausea hit like a rogue wave as I unlocked the front door. The familiar scent of Daniel's cologne hung heavy in the air, a suffocating reminder of what I'd almost lost. My phone buzzed in my purse, a frantic message from Mark demanding to know where I'd been. Slammed the purse on the counter, phone buzzing like a trapped wasp. Ignored it. Rushing towards the living room. There he was, sprawled on the couch, eyes closed, face pale. Relief washed over me, cold and sudden. Daniel, I called, my voice shaky. He flinched, eyes snapping open. Sarah, you're back early. His voice was hoarse, weak. What's wrong? I rushed to his side, worry momentarily eclipsing the guilt gnawing at me. Migraine, he mumbled, wincing as he reached for his temple. Hit me out of the blue. Fetched a cold compress from the fridge, the ice pack heavy in my hand. Guilt pricked at me again. He needed me, truly needed me, and here I was, riddled with secrets. Helped him sit up, pressing the compress against his forehead. He leaned into the touch, a small sigh escaping his lips. The intimacy of the moment felt wrong, tainted by the knowledge of my betrayal. Feeling a little better? I asked, forcing a smile that felt brittle. He opened his eyes, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his gaze. Yeah, thanks. Silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. The phone in my purse buzzed again, insistent and accusatory. Might have overdone it at work today, I blurted, panicked by the silence. Stress and all. He didn't respond, just stared at me with those unreadable eyes. The silence stretched, and under his gaze, I felt like a fraud, a stranger in my own life. Suddenly, his phone on the coffee table buzzed. He reached for it, a frown creasing his brow as he looked at the screen. My heart hammered in my chest. Work email? A friend? Or? He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he unlocked the phone and placed it face down on the table. Let's get you some soup, he mumbled, pushing himself off the couch. The gesture could have been interpreted as caring, considerate. But in his current state, with that unreadable look in his eyes, it felt more like a deliberate act, a calculated move in a game I didn't understand. Heart hammering a frantic tattoo against my ribs, I scrambled to grab my phone. It lay forgotten on the kitchen counter, the screen accusingly bright with a new message. Later tonight? My place? Mark's name burned into my retinas, each letter a searing reminder of the mess I'd created. Panic choked me. Tonight? No way could I swing that. Not with the couple's massage Daniel had booked for tomorrow. The irony twisted like a knife in my gut. A massage meant to reconnect us, while I was tangled in a web of lies. Fumbled with a reply, fingers shaking. Can't. Already booked. Busy tomorrow night too. Sent it before I could chicken out, before the guilt could morph into another lie. Stared at the message, willing it to disappear. But the damage was done. The weight of my secret felt like a physical presence in the room, suffocating me. Suddenly, the front door creaked open. Daniel. Relief washed over me, cold and sudden, momentarily pushing the guilt aside. Hey, he said, a hint of tiredness in his voice. Rough day? Yeah, you? I forced a smile, the effort leaving my face feeling strained. Long one, he sighed, shrugging off his jacket. But hey, at least it's Friday. Friday. The day I was supposed to meet Mark. The day the fragile normalcy I'd built with Daniel would shatter. A wave of nausea hit me. How could I face him at the massage tomorrow, knowing what I knew, feeling what I felt? You alright? Daniel's brow furrowed, concern flickering in his eyes. Just a headache, I lied, wincing for effect. Stressful day, remember? He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on me a beat too long. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Think an early night might be good, I mumbled, desperate to escape the scrutiny in his eyes. He didn't argue, just squeezed my shoulder gently. Yeah, probably. Headed straight for the bedroom, the weight of his unspoken questions pressing down on me. Crawled into bed, the sheets cold and empty beside me. Sleep felt a million miles away. All I could see was Daniel's concerned face, a stark reminder of the life I was playing a dangerous game with. Tomorrow, the massage. Tomorrow, the truth. Or maybe, just maybe, another lie. The thought hung heavy in the air, a fragile hope battling against the tide of my deceit. Stiff as a board, I lay on the massage table, the gentle kneading of the masseuse's hands a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. Every touch felt amplified, a physical manifestation of the guilt gnawing at me. You seem tense, the masseuse said softly. Anything bothering you? The question hung in the air, a silent accusation. How could I explain the real source of my tension, the secret burning a hole in my stomach? Just a long week, I mumbled, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. Closed my eyes, trying to focus on the rhythmic strokes, the soothing scent of lavender oil. Tried to forget about the lie I'd told Daniel to get us here, to this couple's massage, a mockery of the connection we once shared. The session ended too soon. Stepped off the table feeling no lighter, the guilt clinging to me like a second skin. Dinner afterward was a strained affair. Daniel, bless him, tried to make conversation. But every question felt like a probing finger, inching closer to the truth I desperately wanted to bury. Dessert arrived, a small chocolate cake, a sweet reminder of happier times. Daniel reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine. A jolt went through me, a stark contrast to the practiced ease I'd shared with Mark. Here, he said, his voice gentle, pulling a small box from his pocket. For you. Inside, nestled on velvet, was a delicate silver necklace. A perfect replica of one I'd admired years ago. A gift meant to rekindle the spark, to recapture the past. Tears welled up, blurring my vision. The gesture, meant for good, only highlighted the present I was destroying. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table. A quick glance at the screen and the blood drained from my face. Mark. A single word. Tonight? Panic choked me. Tonight? No way could I swing that. Not after the massage, not after the necklace, not after the fragile hope Daniel's gesture had ignited. Sarah, you alright? Daniel's voice cut through my panic. Yeah, just. I stammered, desperately searching for an excuse. A friend just texted, need some help with something. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, the taste of betrayal metallic in my mouth. Daniel frowned, his gaze searching my face. Is everything okay? I held his gaze, willing him to believe me, willing myself to believe the lie. But beneath the surface, a truth crackled, threatening to erupt and shatter the fragile peace we held. Slipped out the back door like a thief, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The cool night air felt like a slap, momentarily cutting through the haze of adrenaline and stolen excitement. He was waiting by his car, a relieved smile spreading across his face as he saw me. Guilt pricked at me, a tiny spark overshadowed by the thrill of the forbidden. We drove in comfortable silence, a familiar routine settling in. But tonight, something felt different. A shadow, a flicker of doubt I couldn't quite place. Was it the memory of Daniel's hopeful smile at dinner, the way his eyes had lingered on mine? Or was this the first taste of regret, a bitter aftertaste to the stolen pleasure? He parked in a secluded spot, a familiar lover's lane. We fumbled with each other, urgency laced with a strange tentativeness. Thinking of going away for the weekend, he said between kisses, his voice husky. Thought of a nice cabin up north. The suggestion hung in the air. A weekend getaway. With him. A part of me, a tiny, fragile part, yearned for a real escape. But with who? Shoved the thought away, clinging to the moment, the stolen intimacy. But the thrill felt muted, overshadowed by a growing unease. Later, driving home, the silence in the car felt suffocating. Dropped him off at his place, the goodbye an empty formality. Steeling myself, I unlocked the front door. The house greeted me with a stifling silence. Daniel was already asleep, his back turned towards me. Relief washed over me, cold and sudden. But as I slipped into bed, the silence pressed down on me, heavy and accusatory. Did he suspect something? The question hung in the air, a seed of doubt taking root in my stomach. Then, a wave of nausea hit me, so sudden and violent it brought tears to my eyes. Rushed to the bathroom, heart pounding a frantic tattoo. Minutes later, staring at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, the weight of reality slammed into me. The thrill of the affair evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. The positive test lay stark against the counter, a stark symbol of the life I was playing with, the life I might be throwing away. Panic clawed at me, a chilling counterpoint to the strange, unfamiliar sense of longing for the life I was recklessly abandoning. The positive pregnancy test mocked me from the bathroom counter, a constant reminder of the truth I couldn't escape. Fear gnawed at me, a cold serpent coiling tighter with each passing day. I had to tell Daniel. The longer I waited, the deeper the lies would burrow, the harder the truth would be to swallow. But the thought of confession sent a fresh wave of panic crashing over me. How could I even begin to explain the tangled mess I'd woven? Shame choked me, a thick, suffocating fog clouding my judgment. Days bled into weeks, the unspoken truth festering between us like a poisoned wound. Every casual conversation felt strained, every shared glance a potential accusation. The guilt gnawed at me, a relentless parasite feeding on my happiness. One morning, Daniel reached across the breakfast table, placing a hand on my stomach. "You seem different lately," he said, his voice laced with concern. I flinched, heart hammering against my ribs. Different how? My voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," he frowned, his gaze lingering on my midsection. "Maybe it's just me, but you seem fuller." Panic choked me. Fuller? I stammered, desperately searching for an excuse. "Oh, right, I started this new healthy diet. Mostly whole grains and stuff." The lie felt heavy on my tongue, a bitter pill I forced myself to swallow. He looked unconvinced, but thankfully, didn't press the issue. Relief washed over me, cold and fleeting. Later that evening, while flipping through old photo albums, a memory surfaced. Him, holding me close, whispering about a weekend getaway to celebrate our anniversary. My stomach lurched. The fabricated illness I'd used to cancel the trip felt like a lifetime ago, another layer of deceit piled onto the growing mountain. "Remember that trip we were supposed to take?" he asked, a wistful smile playing on his lips. The memory of my stolen rendezvous with Mark slammed into me, sharp and painful. "Yeah," I mumbled, forcing a smile. The way he looked at me, a flicker of longing in his eyes, made my throat tighten. Suddenly, the weight of my betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating. How could I have been so careless, so reckless? The answer hung heavy in the air, a silent accusation. The thrill of the affair, now a distant memory, paled in comparison to the life I was jeopardizing. Daniel deserved the truth. But the words wouldn't come. Trapped in a web of my own making, I could only stare at him, a silent plea for forgiveness choking the air around me. The doctor's sterile voice echoed in my ears, a clinical confirmation of the truth I'd been desperately avoiding. Tears welled up, blurring the vision of the sonogram flickering on the screen. A tiny heartbeat, a life growing within me. "Congratulations," the doctor said, the word landing hollowly in the silence of the room. Congratulations? More like a sentence, the weight of it settling on my already burdened shoulders. The entire drive home was a blur. My mind raced, replaying every lie, every stolen moment. Finally, the house came into view, a stark symbol of the life I'd jeopardized. Steeled myself for the inevitable conversation, the truth a bitter pill I had to swallow. Found Daniel in the living room, a book in his hand, a picture of normalcy shattered by the storm raging within me. "We need to talk," I blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. He looked up, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Everything all right?" "No," I choked back a sob. It's about everything." And then, the words came rushing out, a torrent of confession that left me raw and exposed. The affair with Mark, the stolen moments, the web of lies I'd spun. Each word felt like a shard of glass, tearing through the fragile fabric of our relationship. Daniel sat there, his expression unreadable, his silence deafening. The air grew thick with unspoken emotions, a suffocating weight pressing down on me. Then, anger. It flared in his eyes, a cold fury that mirrored the self-loathing churning in my gut. How long? He finally rasped, his voice a low growl. I told him, the details blurring with each tear that streamed down my face. To my surprise, there were no accusations, no screaming. Just a quiet hurt that resonated in the silence. He stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. I need some air, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He walked out, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my own making. The slamming of the front door echoed like a gunshot, shattering the last vestiges of hope clinging to my heart. Days turned into weeks. No calls, no texts, not even a single email. Just a deafening silence that spoke volumes more than any angry words could. The realization of what I'd lost hit me with the force of a tidal wave. The love, the trust, the life we'd built together, all gone in a flash of reckless